Okay, we're live. All
There
right,
you go.
there we go. Hello, everybody. I'm Daniel Char, and I'm here with another Dan, Dan Doré, property manager with lots of experience, over 20 years of experience helping full-time investors and part-time investors manage their properties. He's based out of Ottawa, and he's going to be doing a major event. Actually, by the time this airs, the event would have been done. The Wealth Mastery event with Robert Kiyosaki. Who else is going to be there? Kevin Harrington and Robert G. Allen.
That's right. That's
with
right.
Sunil Tosiani. So
Exactly.
very big event, and you're going to be a speaker there.
I am. Yes.
Yeah. So tell us about yourself, Dan, and what is property management and how could it benefit our investors?
Sure. Well, as Daniel just alluded to, I'm from Ottawa, Canada, if somebody's out of the country, and I've owned rental property for over 20 years. I've been a property manager, have my own management company, also own a real estate investment group as well. And you know, what is property management all about? Property management, in a very simple terms, always depends who I'm talking to, which audience. But usually, you know, if somebody's already done this, they've already owned rental property, or somebody that's completely new. But for somebody who's completely new, generally the role of a property manager is to take on the day-to-day needs of owning a rental property. So usually we take on what the owner would have to do if they were doing it on their own, which would essentially be making sure that the units are occupied, and if not, to solicit for new tenancies and promote the property and show it and go through the screening process and application process and setting up of files and preparing move-ins and utilities and drafting up leases and inspections and ongoing you know, maintenance, repairs, communication with the tenant, and then generally you know, dealing with any emergency or any requirements that happen to come along with the property. So that's really skimming through it really quickly. So, and if somebody who's, you know, who's in the game, they know, you know, what it is. Usually we get more respect for somebody who's done it themselves before, because they understand what it needs to happen. So really for them, it's mostly about leverage, right? It's leveraging your time, resources, and always going back to the reason why you invested in real estate to start with, right? So.
Thank you. So I know there's two camps. Those who really believe in property management and those who want to do everything themselves. What are the pros and cons of doing it yourself versus handing off the responsibility to someone like yourself, a professional who does it every day?
Yeah, I think it boils down to how, you know, how do you value your time? Right? What was the reason why you got invested in real estate? If somebody has a lot of time on their hands and it's something they like to do as a part-time, you know, job, and they like to do a bit of work and they have no issues on, you know, how much time it takes, then sometimes self-managing makes sense. And then for others where, you know, they may have a job, a business, a family, more investments, or, you know, more time commitments, property management's a must. I don't know how anybody can do it without, you know, without being bogged down. It's like you're getting a part-time job if you don't do that. So it really does depend, right? So
yeah, and yeah. Is a property manager a fixed cost, or is case by case?
Case by case. For us personally, we go by percentage. So it depends on, you know, the amount of units you have, what the rent roll is, where they're located, what requirements are you know, are needed for each property. And generally for us, there's a flat fee if we have to replace tenants. But I'd say, you know, I've seen it both ways. It really does depend. And I would caution people to look at value more so than cost, I think, when it comes to selecting that. But because sometimes, you know, if somebody has a fixed cost, then there's no incentive to make sure they have people on staff to deal with issues and maintenance and to go the extra mile to make sure things are done properly. Because a lot of times some people think like owning rental property, you just own a property, or you just manage property, you do nothing, you just collect rent. Or, you know, if somebody's doing it. Yeah, well, in 20 years, I can tell you that's not the case.
What about condos? Like,
yep.
I talk to a lot of investors. I have a couple of clients who most of the portfolio are pre-construction condos because it's a set it and forget it mentality, right? You buy a pre-construction condo, you don't have to think about it for 5 years. And then when it's done, you put a tenant in there, and what could possibly go wrong because there's a property manager already on site.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts in that regards?
Well, yeah. So when it comes to property management, there's a lot of confusion on the market as to, property management. A property manager can play different roles, right? So what they're alluding to is when you have a condominium corporation, there's a requirement to have a condo manager that's available. Generally, they're not on site, and they're the ones that will handle condo fees, make sure that there's regular upkeep of the common elements related to the property. It might be snow, exterior maintenance, that type of stuff for condo managers, but they don't look after your tenants. And if they have any issues generally with the heating system or the appliances or anything internal for the unit, or getting your lease, renewed, or making sure your rent's collected, they don't touch that, right? So for us, as the property management that we're focused in is directly focused on rental property management, meaning that we handle all tenant interactions, leases, rent collection, and anything that comes with whatever the landlord's responsible for in terms of repairs, maintenance, or upkeep. So
Okay.
there's a big difference. Yeah.
Big difference. Now, I'm seeing a lot of property managers come into the game now. How would a customer, or let's say, how would an investor distinguish who they should hire? There's like a lot of choices out there. What makes one property manager the right fit or better quality, so and so, than somebody else?
Yeah. I would encourage anybody that's exploring to interview them. And we're doing this during COVID, so it's a bit tougher, but the face-to-face meeting to me is crucial. It should never just be about, signing a contract and not knowing who you're going to deal with. For us, it's a personal relationship. And I think references from existing clients goes a long way. We've lived on years of that with very little, advertising towards services. It's referral based. And I think, if the people who are referring you have experienced, a positive outcome from dealing with a certain management company, and you've met them and they're competitive and you feel that they're the right fit for you, then that's generally the ones I would encourage you to go with. See, for me, when we meet clients, if they're exploring different companies, we encourage them to do so. We want to make sure they choose the best one for them. But at the end of the day, you got to choose which one you feel is in your best interest. And usually the only recommendation I make is that it shouldn't just be made on cost, because cost can come and bite you threefold if it's not done properly after the fact. And we tend to get those after the fact when the mess is there, and then we have to fix it. So yeah,
I like always to pay top dollar, because in many moons ago, anytime I try to save money, it costs me a lot more money than the initial price, right? And it's you're dumping good money after bad money when you're trying to.
And not just that, I think it's so it's value, right? So what comes with it, right? Because a lot of times what ends up happening, people will look at, they'll look at it. Like I had one the other day where, they're exploring it with another company, but this company doesn't even have their own websites. I said, well, if your unit is up for rent, how are they gonna? They just put a free Kijiji ad? Like, is that the way it works? Like, I mean, there needs to be, are they in it? Or, there needs to be, this is a serious task, right? This is not something you do on the weekend when you have time. You have to have like for us, we have a whole marketing team. That's all they do. We have people designated just to fill properties, right? And we have a fully designated service team, full designated accounting team. So if there's any issues, there's always leverage there to make sure that things are getting done, regardless of when that happens. So
it's a one contact stop, right? Like, I buy a rental property. My job now is to make sure that the numbers work.
Of course.
Right.
Your mortgage broker.
Yeah. If the numbers don't work, don't buy the investment property.
Don't buy it.
Don't buy it.
And that's what you call Daniel. Daniel will help you with that.
So let's say the numbers work. You buy the property. We just hand it off to a property manager like yourself, and then that's it. We set it and forget it. Like you put the money in the account too. Like that's all.
Yeah. Wait. So I wouldn't say forget it, but you said it, forget it. Yes. Like for us, for example, a lot of times people say, how much do I need to be implicated? Well, generally, we like to touch base with you once a month just to let you know, if there was any issues. So we always report back to you. We like to have the fluid communication. And if we have any issues on turnover or any, major repairs, or we like to have some type of communication with owners. And like I have a good part of my, the clientele that we have doesn't live in the country. So having them come in and actually see the issue is not possible. But, we still like to have some fluid communication. So you can set it and forget it, yes, but we still, as a management company, still like to report back to you, let you know what's happening so that there's no surprises, right? So we like to have the fluid communication. Sometimes it's making suggestions on, renovating a unit as opposed to, just painting it or adjusting your rent, or maybe not, or maybe trying to make something happen. So we prefer to have some type of communication, but I have landlords that say, you guys take all the decisions. We do all of it for them, and that's fine. But we can do both ways. So.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, tell me some horror stories.
Horror stories.
because
yeah.
Here's the thing I'm thinking of. If you do all the stuff yourself, and if you experience one horror story, you only have one person can only have so many properties, right? But this is your business, so you're managing other people's properties.
Yep.
Some
and
stuff
ours,
has got to go down,
as well.
right?
And ours as well. So we do our own rentals as well, and some that we have with investors as well as third party, right, where we don't own them. So horror stories. Yeah, it always boils down to it's sad, but you know what? We're really not in the business of property management. We're in the business of relationships, right? And the first thing I would tell anybody if we have an issue with a tenant is let's try to reason with them, right? Just try to reason with them, because that's number one. Use the human approach. Everybody's human, right? Some people, they may be a bit, tougher to deal with, and you had issues, and try to reason with them. And if not, do what the law allows you to do. Put your head down and just keep pushing until you get the result, right? Do things right. In terms of horror stories, the worst ones that I've heard are not ones that we were part of, but they're pretty nasty. They'll discourage anybody from getting involved, right? But I always use the analogy that, some people say, well, I don't want to get involved. I don't want my tenant to trash my unit, or I don't want them to live there for free. And we hear that, as a regular pushback. Perfectly fine. Like, owning rental property is not for everybody. And we're not trying to pretend that it is, right? It's not for everyone. If it stresses you out, then don't do it, right?
You got to have
when it comes to, what's that?
You got to have a little stomach for what can go sideways, right?
Yeah, and I use the parallel where I say, you know what? If you leave, because a lot of times people say, well, if I get involved with it, is there a guarantee that I'll never have any problems? And the answer is no. Like, I mean, it'd be like me saying, if we leave for work today and I drive, to work and I come back, what are the chances are that I'll come back alive? Yeah. Without an accident? Well, chances are pretty good.
Yeah.
Right?
But
is it possible that something may happen and somebody, well, it's the same thing with rental properties, right? So we see issues. Yes. Some, you see issues. But when it comes to really horror story type stuff, usually there's been a disconnect somewhere where, personality or something's off, and you have these, a few odd ones that you see on the news where, it just goes completely off the deep end. But our experience has not been that. Our experience has been pretty much a lot more, conservative in terms of what happens. But a lot of it comes from two things. One, what type of unit do you have? Is it in good conditions, in a good area? Is it, well kept? And two, what kind of screening did you do when you brought your people in? Yeah. Right? When those two elements have been dealt with properly, you significantly exceed your chances of being, of having a good experience. But, owning real estate comes with some risk. Yeah. And I listen, I've had somebody asked me the other day, they said, how did you learn about all this landlord and tenant board stuff? And, when people deal with, evictions, I said, oh, that's simple. I said, the first property I bought, in the first 30 days, the tenant brought me to the landlord and tenant board for an infraction. So I said, well, that's a good way of learning. I said, I couldn't have bought that course. Right. So, I think you have to have the personality for it. And, but the reality is, real estate, as we know, and I mean, obviously in the lending business, over time, it tends to creep up in value. And, if you keep up with positive cash flow and you take care of the unit, then usually the wealth gets built over years, and there's tax deferral options and so on. So I think that there's, a lot of times that, we take an issue where we had one a few years ago where there was a tenant that lost their job, and it didn't, and the owner was all distraught about it. And I said, well, look at the amount of times, look at the amount of time it was rented for, what the cost of what it actually was worth when you started renting it, and what it's worth today. You never lost a month until the last one. Yeah. The property was dealt with normally. There's no excessive wear or tear on it. And they had an increase of 20% over the course of a couple of years. So I don't know, I guess you could have sold it and you would have lost out on it. But I think long-term and property management plays a big role, because a lot of people would deviate completely from getting involved unless somebody else would handle it. Right. So
is it true that the condition of your home attracts a certain type of renter, like in terms of repayment, or even the kind of rent that you can expect?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Listen, put yourself in
Or is it the location more? Is it more the location, or is it condition?
Well, it depends, right? If you're downtown Toronto and I show you the nicest place in the suburbs for half the price, but you don't want to be there, it doesn't really matter how nice it is, right? So it depends on the needs of people. But put yourself in the tenant's shoes, right? So this is where there's a lot of disconnect when people invest in real estate. You say, well, who's your client? Mm-hmm. The client's your tenant. The tenant's the client. So if you're a tenant and you're coming in to see a property, and the carpets are stained and the rub marks and it's dirty and it doesn't smell good and there's pet feces, and how impressive is that for you? Irrelevant of the price or the location.
Yeah.
A reasonably normal person would not be, attracted to a unit like this, right? So it makes a huge difference when it comes to, successful real estate investing to really get the right people in, but you need to show them the right product. The location's the location. That was, you chose that when you bought it, right? So that, you would have done your due diligence at that point. But when it comes to the actual operations of it, and a lot of times if you're switching tenants, you can't always control that, because a tenant might, the existing tenant might say, I don't want to do my dishes and so on, right? Yeah. Then we play that, but we would go back to them. We encourage them to do so. Say, listen, there's a couple of ways this could go, right? If you clean it up, chances are we'll bring one good tenant in, we rent it, we never have to bug you until you leave. But if I have to keep bringing people because everybody gets discouraged, then we may bring 5, 6, 7, 10 people through, bothering you every time. So you have an incentive, Mr. Existing Tenant or Mrs. Existing Tenant, to keep the unit clean so we can try to promote it and get out of your hair, right? So
got it. In terms of location, are you a very let's call it, do you have to be local? So I know we're in Toronto right now, you're in Ottawa. Is it possible for our viewers who have rental properties in Toronto, some of them might be on the way to Ottawa, but not in the heart of Ottawa, is it possible to have a property manager who's not in town also do management?
Yes, but not ideal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yes, we could do it remotely, but there's nothing like having boots on the ground. There's just nothing like it. Like for us, we're in Ottawa. We wouldn't extend services out of an area we can't, because we know we wouldn't be able to provide the level of service that we're used to providing, right? So you have a restricted area. But to answer your question, yes, we could do it, because I don't need to have an accounting office and an operations and a sales office. It could all be done remotely. But the reality is, when you're in the mix, the area, the people are there, they can drive to it. They have the contractors we know. It just makes for a much better experience. So, yeah.
So, with the property management expenses for an investor, can they write that off?
Yes.
On the taxes?
Yep. It's 100% tax deductible. Any fees generally that are paid for property management services, leasing services, that type of stuff, it's a complete write-off.
Okay,
so when you look at the
positive, then you're okay, because you just include that into your calculations, and it's not really coming out of your pocket then.
Yeah, if we go a bit more technical, I always say, if you look at the after-tax implications,
Yeah.
because when you look at it, because it really, we have the fee, but once you deduct it, you take your taxes off, and most people would pay, 30, 40% in taxes. The after-tax implication of bringing in a property manager to do, the role of that 24 hours, 7 days a week type role, if you don't do it, you're working for pennies on the dollar. It is what it is, right? And I go through that when we went at the event on December 5th, when I do the math, because I'm going to go through some of the realizations when I was doing it. I'm like, what am I doing? Right? Because then you realize, you're like, wow, it makes no sense, not to do that. Right. So
Not to do that. Now,
yep.
with property management, is there regulations in this field, or you guys can make up the rules on how you govern or run your business?
Yeah.
Like, what does the industry have? Like the investors, what kind of safeguards do they have?
Yeah. So essentially, if just to make sure I understand your question, are you talking about the industry as a whole, like for rentals, or you're talking about property management?
Property management. So like,
Okay.
let's say, and if something happens, like in our business, in the mortgage business, we're under FSRA, Financial Services Regulations, right?
Yep.
So if a mortgage broker or mortgage agent does something wrong, a client can complain, and they can potentially suffer suspension or losing their license. Is there something like that in your field, or it's fully hands off?
Well, the property management for rentals, no. Generally, it goes with contract law, the way it's set up. Needless to say, like for us, we go the extra mile. We're insured for errors and omissions, for liability. I've got a bond on the company as well. So if ever we were found to do something wrong, we're all insured. I don't know, it's not a requirement. So you got to be careful. You got to use somebody that has that they're well protected in order for you to be protected. But to answer your question, no, it's not like a licensed realtor or a mortgage broker or even condo management. Condo management, because they're handling a lot of funds on behalf of a slew of people, they need to be licensed. In the area we're in, the role that we play is not licensed, no. But we go the extra mile to really protect the consumer regardless. So
that's a big point that you have that in there. So
yep. Yeah, we wouldn't do it any other way. Like it's just, and see, you have to understand, I'm on the other side of the fence too, right? Where I also own rental properties. So it's all about protection both ways. And like, I know some management companies will fund you every 3 months. Whereas for us, we net out, every 15th of every month, right? So whatever rent was collected gets flushed out every, 10 business days after the fact. So there's never any money kept in trust, for extended periods of time. So we try to really limit any downfall. So it's really transparent. So.
Okay. Yep. So for the people who are still like, I can do it all by myself, I've been doing it myself for the last 10 years. How much work is in property management, and how time consuming is it really? How much time can you actually free somebody who's like just hard-headed? They've been doing it themselves for many years and they just don't want to change, right?
Yeah, I guess it comes from, it depends, right? Because there could be some people who are really take care of their things, right? Well, they do the proper maintenance and so on. And I would just encourage them to keep a log of how much time it takes, right? Because you'll see how much. The reality is, some people, regardless of how, inexpensive or how, expensive it would be, it doesn't matter. They'll still want to do it themselves. And that's perfectly fine. Like there's nothing wrong with that, right? Some people prefer to do it. For us, I guess the angle, and even for me, when I started off at the beginning, it was a matter of the amount of work it would generate while I was still had, take care of my other job and my business and all that. And then it just came in where, you always know that these calls come in right when you're busy or you're about to leave, on a trip or it's in the middle of the night and they have this issue. And you're like, I could be doing something else. I could be sleeping right now, right? But so if I was leveraging off, resources from a management company, then generally the cost is not that expensive, and they have all the resources to do it, right? For most, I'm not saying, not going to generalize. I speak obviously more so for us, but that for us, it just makes no sense when you look at it. You look at the amount of time you'd be, devoting to doing that, and a lot of times people say, yeah, but sometimes I have no issues. Yes, I understand sometimes you have no issues, but the day you do have it, you know, if somebody's stove isn't working and you can't deal with it today because you're gone for 3-4 days, what kind of service are you giving to your tenant, right? That's what, you know, and where's the money coming from? The money's coming from the rent. So you want to make sure these people are happy, they're taken care of, right? So I think when it comes to customer service, but if you don't care about that, and generally you tend to get a lot more turnover on your tenants, and that's, you know, there's not, you know, there's nothing I can tell you that will make you change your mind if that's what you think.
So we always hear about the saying that the leaky toilet at 2 a.m, right? We always hear about that saying.
Yeah.
So my understanding is when we hire a property management, that tenant just calls you guys.
Exactly. We're the central point of contact.
That's it.
Yeah. So the biggest, listen, Daniel, here's the secret. The biggest reason why people hire us is because they don't want to deal with they don't want to deal with the tenant directly. Mm-hmm. Right? Because when a tenant calls you, it's tough, you know, to make a decision because there's emotions. They know you're the decision maker. Right? But if they call the management company, we have a protocol. This is the way it works. The emotions, obviously, we're human, but our emotions are not this. We're not set up the same way, right? So we're just saying, listen, we're just doing what we need to do. But when you're dealing with a tenant directly, and the tenant has issues with payment, or they can't pay their rent, or there's little thing here, I want to do this, and next thing you know, we've seen some messes where you're like, I've taken owners out of messes where they've been months without payment just because they'd gotten friends with the people living inside.
Wow.
And you're like, yeah, I understand, but why do you own the real estate? Right? Yeah, but he's going through a bad time. Okay, fair. Like, I mean, it's your unit. You can do what you want. But at the end of the day, you know, and I always say, you know, the longer the rope, you know, the longer you give them to resolve the issue, the harder it is to clean up. Yeah. Because, I mean, think about it. If you're a tenant and you're 3 months in arrears and you can go rent somewhere else for, you know, first and last month's rent and really have it been applied on rent for time you're actually going to live there, what's more enticing, to pay your arrears where you're living or to move?
Yeah, you rather just move because
exactly.
Because when you pay the arrears, another 30 days you got another.
Exactly. So you know, for us it's you know, it's business for us, right? So if somebody, you know, we don't run into too many of it, but if somebody has issues, the process starts right away. We don't wait 3 months until we start doing things. And I just want to underline, I didn't get involved in property management to put people on the road. I hate doing that. That's the part that, you know, if we had to do that every month, I go crazy. I hate doing that, right? But at the end of the day, you know, we all invested in real estate to grow our wealth and, you know, to increase our quality of life. And, you know, sometimes you have to deal with business, right? And, but emotions, I tell you, it's probably number one reason why people would hire a management company, just so they don't have to deal with it one-on-one. And it makes a big difference. Much easier to deal with it as a third party than it is to deal with it firsthand. So,
Thank you. Well, you shared a wealth of knowledge right now. Do you have any last things that you want to just share with our viewers right before we head off?
Yeah, not really. I think you know, when it comes to selecting a management company, you know, meet them. I think that's maybe because I'm a people person, I like to meet people, and most of the clients we deal with, I've met, you know, one-on-one or through someone else or so on. I think that, you know, we're in the business of people, more so in business of relationships, right? And I think that's key when you get involved. And you see anybody who's in real estate now, they're doing it themselves. They can appreciate what, you know, the work that's involved. And somebody who hasn't done it before, you know, perhaps you want to do it on your own at the beginning just to get a sense of what it is. But you know, it's a business and it needs to be dealt with properly. And you know, if you go off track, then it can be costly to address. So
awesome.
Yeah.
I do have one question that just popped into my head. Sure. When somebody's buying a rental property, do they hire you at closing once everything's complete, or can they hire you to fix up the place and then throw the tenant in so that they're fully hands off right from day one? Or do they have to do the renovations themselves and then hire you to put the tenant in?
Yeah, for us, it's full service. A lot of times we get hired before the deal closes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, even for us, what we've done and what I've encouraged people to do, because some get get themselves in a bit of a mess, is when people are looking to buy property where there's no existing tenant in it, right? We would encourage if they're going to use our services going forward, just say, listen, send us what you're looking at, and we'll do a market analysis of what we think we can attract, so you can get an unbiased opinion as to what you're going to get in terms of rent. Because a lot of times what they end up doing, they end up looking at a Kijiji ad or whatever the realtor tells them, and no disrespect to realtors, but you got to understand the motive, right? And for us, it's about trying to get you in a position where you're able to have a successful real estate investment, as opposed to getting involved in something where you're expecting a much higher amount in rent and then realizing once you close that that's not achievable, right? And even if you're buying, even if I'll go a bit deeper on that if you allow me to, but even if you're buying a property with an existing tenancy inside, you still want to do your research, because I've seen a few interesting situations where somebody's selling a property with a tenancy inside. And then we start looking at it a bit deeper, you realize, oh, it's their sister or their brother. And they signed a lease that makes the building looks really, really great, but there's no way that rent can be replicated. Yet, when they buy it, the numbers work, right? The cash on cash, net operating income, everything makes sense. But then with that tenant leaves, what happens?
Everything goes down.
Exactly.
Because it never worked in the first place.
Exactly. But I've seen some interesting ones. I had one recently, actually, where an owner wanted to buy a property, and the whole operation was dealt with Airbnb rentals, short-term rentals. He's like, oh my gosh, it's a 20% return on investment, and I want to buy this. And I'm like, well, first of all, I don't know about Toronto, but in Ottawa, they want to ban third-party, short-term rentals, right? Just so that's number one. So I said, you got to be careful. You may not be able to do that to start with. And number two, I said, look at the price of the property, right? Yeah, but I'm getting this revenue. I know, but look at a comparable house just 2 doors down. It sells for $100,000 less. There's no proprietary anything of this property. They're just showing you a really nice income statement with a business that may not even be able to operate going forward. Yeah. But the house is the same. You just go buy the other house next door. You could do the same thing and you'll spend less, but you're buying it based on the income statement as opposed to the actual asset. So you got to be careful, right? You got to be careful. So yeah, I can go on and on with this stuff.
I really like that point. I think that was a huge gold nugget, because I get a lot of emails from realtors, wholesalers every day, and every day there's an opportunity, and it's like, yeah, you're right, like 20% return, and when I get a statement or an offer on an outskirt property where I don't understand the market, I get really incentivized. I'm like, wow, that's really good. But when I get an offer and it's around the neighborhood, I'm like, you can't get this kind of rent. Are you serious? Right? Yeah. So I didn't even think of that point that you mentioned, that where you could bring that statement to a property manager just to get a third-party opinion if that's actually possible. Like, is this legit numbers that we're working with? Because
listen,
it might all be inflated.
Anybody that we deal with, Daniel, we highly encourage them to reach out to us before they make the purchase. Because there's nothing worse, and I'll be speaking about a situation at the event, but there's nothing worse than buying a property, especially if it's your first one, and your numbers are off. Like it's oh my gosh, my heart crushes when I see that, because it's, in real estate, it's a compounding effect, right? So if you start off well, then generally you can compound going forward. But if you start off with a bad situation, it may kill off that whole strategy for you going forward. Or it's much tougher now, because now you got to correct a problem and then try to get over the hump. So those are costly mistakes. And my gosh, I tell you, it's just, especially if you're young and you're thinking of doing that, like just I don't know, check your numbers. Make sure your numbers are accurate. I mean, listen, it doesn't eliminate the risk completely, right? And I don't want to, sound like it does, but try to put all the chances on your side when you go through that research. So, yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that too when I was presented some offers to purchase some properties, and the rents were really high. And I asked the person, when did this tenant come in? And the tenant just came in, I think about a month ago or so. It's really fresh rents, right? And I don't know how long they're gonna stay, but you can see the deposits spike dramatically. And for that town or that area, it shouldn't be that high. Yeah. So,
yeah. So you got to be careful. So sometimes it may be because the product was different, right? It may be a new product as opposed to old inventory that's being compared to. So some of it may be legitimate, but I think it definitely is worth, it's worth exploring, right? Because a lot of times what ends up happening is people take face value what is being presented to them. And I always say, when they tell me this is the cap rate, yeah, good for them. Let me see the real numbers. How do they get to that number, right? And let me go scrutinize what it is and see, right? Because, you got to remember that people who are selling, they're trying to sell, right? And no disrespect to them, but as investors, we're trying to make good investment decisions. And, a lot of the scrutiny happens, when you go through that project, when you go through the numbers, as diligently as you can. So
yeah. Tell me how much the property really makes, not what I want it to make.
Exactly. Because as humans, we tend to overestimate, what the revenue, we tend to, underestimate what it's going to cost, because then it makes us feel good. But, and we laugh about it. We all, we're all human, but the reality is if you set yourself up for success at the beginning, then you can compound on it, and it's, it tends to be a lot more enjoyable. So.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Dan. You brought a wealth of knowledge to this interview. For everybody who's watching, I'm going to put Dan's information in the description below. That's how you can contact him, his website. He's going to be speaking at the Wealth Mastery with Robert Kiyosaki. So don't miss out. There's going to be a link over there too. And thank you so much, Dan. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, have a great day.